Okay, alright. New year, new me. Alright, I gotta work so hard this year. I'm gonna produce so much art. I'm gonna become such a god. Okay, what day is it again? Wait, what do you mean it's March? Okay, stay calm. You got this. Everything will be all. Everything is not okay. You know what? I have an idea. Alright, I got something. Okay, never mind, I don't. This was a great year. Speaking seriously though, 2019, it was pretty good, honestly, for me, all things considered. Unlike in 2018, where my style underwent a huge change, 2019 was more about refining what I already had, in adding in just a ton of experimentation in both my process and generally how things looked. And so with this video, what I wanted to do was to just reflect on everything I did and everything I learned in 2019. My biggest goal in art is to tell a story. I want to be able to, take all the experiences I had. I want to be able to take all the experiences that I had in life so far and, be able to express them in, a story of my own creation. And so, I just did it. I planned for about 3 months. I planned out the general arcs, and then I planned out the specific plot points. And after that, I wrote a shitty light novel version of it, which I probably won't show to many people. And I started drawing it. And eventually, in early November, I released it. It's Spark of Life. There's only very few episodes out right now as of time of recording because if you look in the comic, the comic's fully painted. It's fully painted by yours truly. And doing that is extremely difficult and time consuming. So, the comic releases about monthly right now because of just how much work it is, but I hope it's okay. And I hope that if you do read it, you like what you see so far and look forward to what I have in store. The most important change for me this year was routine and organization. Every day when I got to my PC, the first thing I did was always to open up Clip Studio and create what I call my warm-up canvas for the day. So for example, today is the 11th of January. I'll put January 11th. There we go. And this is like a sketchbook page, I practice stuff, I plan out illustrations, and when I got a good idea in there, I expand it and move it to its own file. And supporting that was my file organization. My art folder has a ton of subfolders, but the most important are finished and working files. So finished is where I place all my finished illustrations, and all of them have a very specific file name. So let's take an example. For example, this one, Lily Fox Mechanic. So the file name tells me that it's the 12th piece that I did this year, finished on the 16th of May, and it's of Lily the Fox Mechanic. On the other hand, there's my working files, and I sorted by year, and then by month. You can see all the illustrations, individual working files here outside, and of course within here, it's all the warm-up files. There's a ton of files. My art folder takes up like 40 gigabytes because there's just so many different files. And all of this really helps me get into a routine of drawing every single day. And the organization streamlined it a lot, make things easy to find, especially you know when I needed to show something when I was live streaming on Twitch. Attribution-ShareAlike by the way. The biggest change, just looking at the 2018, like over here, and the 2019 folders, show quite a big difference. I've begun to do a lot more varied backgrounds, using more varied colors, setting different moods. My thinking when starting a piece has shifted away from being completely character focused, like I have to draw this character like this, and instead towards imagining a whole scene, imagining a composition. And that has been working out pretty well, even though trying to think of compositions and stuff, it's really difficult. Later in the year, I started doing more studies as well, just sketching out random things. They've been turning out really well too. I've actually genuinely forgot just how fun sketching things really are. And to have rediscovered that, even though it was very late in 2019, I'm glad to have done that. Too many artists only draw one thing. I'm looking at you, 99% of anime artists, and I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to discover a scene in my head, and then afterwards be able to draw it from any angle, no matter what it is. That's a really advanced skill, and I don't have it yet. It might take like another decade or something to develop, but I'll get there, hopefully. I better. My drawing process has also changed throughout much of this year. Okay, wait, downloads. Oh yeah, right, I deleted it, whoops. This is the part where I experimented with like the most. Basically, no two drawings for this year was done in exactly the same way. It's kind of ridiculous actually. Well, the first difference was the brushes that I used. So before, I would use one of two brushes for most of the work. So I will use this watercolor brush. It's got watercolor side. And what it does is that it's very soft. You can see it's very soft and it blends with pen pressure. So I put another color here. See here? It blends together really well. It gets a very soft look like this. And afterwards I used a different watercolor brush. This watercolor brush has lesser blending, but the edges here are still very soft. Eventually though, I got kinda sick of a lot of these soft edges. Soft edges look really nice, but I've kept wanting to have this kind of harder edges to make my work stand out more. So eventually, I shifted towards this texture brush. It's just a pretty standard texture brush with a no pressure opacity to it. That's about it. And then afterwards, I shifted to a brush without any texture. Just a plain old pressure opacity brush without textures. The reason for this shift towards much simpler brushes was because, I got really frustrated when the watercolor brushes with all the blending and their weird soft edges, when I do something and the brush didn't exactly do what I wanted. I always felt like I could get the program or, get my vision onto the canvas a lot easier when I use simpler brushes, which was very strange. I think it's me relying less on the tools and relying more on my own understanding instead. I think that's a good thing. Later, I might move back to more textured stuff as I do much more difficult paintings. So one other trick that I learned, this one I got from watching Sims Art paint, is they have brushes set to different layer modes. Here you can see that I have multiply, I have glows, I have overlays. And this allows me to take advantage of the layer modes without even having to create a new layer, which is great. Speaking of layers, I've basically gone down to using two layers for most of my drawings. One for the character and one for the background usually. Layers just became more and more of a hassle. as you know, whenever I draw something and it's not on the right layer, that was really infuriating. I just want to put a color down and just have it, you know, do exactly what I want without any additional stuff to it. Sometimes too, I experimented with one layer. So one layer for literally everything in the painting. I'm not able to do that consistently, but you know, for some of them, they went really well. Okay, first part is general messiness. I never really bothered rendering things out really well. For example, you see here in Mamizo, the drawing of Mamizo that I did, the forest in the background, the colors look fine if you zoom out, but if you zoom in, it just look like a complete disaster. Like, the same is for this one as well. This is for Kisachi's draw this in your style. Look at the background. It's thousands of little squares, and the colors look great, but when you zoom in just a little bit of zoom in, and you realize how much, like, how haphazardly the entire background was drawn in. And the backgrounds as well, most of them, they were rather uninspired. I think a lot of backgrounds that I did were rather plain, and they weren't very interesting. I mean, I did do some fancier backgrounds, some fancier compositions, but a lot of them, they were kinda, you know, substandard. Next up is lighting. For a lot of my pieces, the lighting is really boring. And it's not really that great or that dramatic. I'm not really using the lighting to show form. A lot of times it's just a bit of ambient occlusion and not really much else. So it doesn't look very dynamic, it doesn't look dramatic, it doesn't look interesting. And that's a huge issue for me. And because I tend to be very afraid. Of using colors that are either too bright or too dark, and that's something I really want to change. Next is similar compositions. Most of my drawings, anime girl in the middle. I can do better than that, right? It's kind of boring to just draw anime girls, centered frame most of the time. Nah, I can do something different. Streaming! Have I mentioned I stream on twitch.tv/kwanfi yet? Because I do! I've been streaming for about maybe 5 months now, and Twitch has been really fun, both as a streamer and as a viewer of other people's streams myself. And you know, I've managed to meet so many people. It's been a very great experience. Although sometimes people like 10 times better than I am come into the chat, and that's really scary. And that's it. I know I haven't made a YouTube video in like way too long, but I want to put more effort into this video making thing because I really do enjoy this process, as painful and tedious as it actually is. And you know, I have another one in the works, so hopefully the next video shouldn't be too far off. But if you made it this far, do subscribe, follow my other social medias. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye!